The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, and it made absolutely no sense. Someone had scheduled a wedding at Daniel Carter's house. At first, Daniel thought it was a joke. His peaceful lakeside home sat at the end of a quiet private road, far from the neighborhood clubhouse or community park. Yet the email from the Homeowners Association looked official. It included a full event schedule, parking instructions, decorations plans, and even a note thanking him for allowing the community to use his beautiful property for such a special occasion. Daniel stared at the screen in disbelief. The HOA had just scheduled a full wedding ceremony in his backyard, without asking him. Without even telling him, the message explained that the community board believed Daniel's large garden in Lakeview would be the perfect location for a neighborhood wedding celebration. According to the note, dozens of guests would arrive Saturday afternoon. Tables, decorations, and a ceremony arch would be installed early that morning. Daniel read the email again, slower this time. It wasn't a mistake. They genuinely believed they could use his property, his peaceful backyard, where he spent years restoring the old garden and rebuilding the wooden deck, had somehow been turned into a wedding venue on the HOA calendar. Daniel leaned back in his chair, confused but calm. He knew something important the HOA clearly didn't, and once they realized the truth, this wedding plan was going to collapse faster than anyone expected. But for now, Daniel simply picked up his phone and started making a few quiet calls, because before the weekend arrived, he intended to shut this entire situation down. By Wednesday morning, the situation had already become stranger. Daniel walked outside to water the garden and froze. Two unfamiliar people were standing near his fence, measuring the lawn. They were holding clipboards and discussing where chairs might fit. Daniel approached slowly. "Can I help you?" he asked calmly. One of them smiled politely. "Oh yes. We're just checking the space for Saturday's wedding setup. The HOA said the ceremony will be here by the lake." Daniel blinked once, so it was real. The Homeowners Association had not only scheduled a wedding at his house, they had already started planning it. The workers showed him a printed layout map, rows of chairs on the grass, a white ceremony arch facing the water, tables for guests near the deck, even a small dance area under string lights. Daniel listened quietly as they explained the schedule. The bride and groom would arrive around sunset. Guests would park along the road. Music would play during the ceremony. To them, everything seemed perfectly normal, but Daniel noticed something interesting. Neither of them had ever spoken to him before. They were simply following instructions from the HOA. Daniel thanked them politely and told them to pause their measurements for now. As they left, he looked out across his peaceful backyard. The lake reflected the morning sun. Birds moved through the trees. It was the same calm place he had enjoyed for years, and now the HOA believed they could transform it into a wedding venue. Daniel smiled slightly, because they were about to learn something important, something that would completely change their plans before Saturday ever arrived. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel received another message from the HOA board. This one was not friendly. The email explained that the wedding preparations were already approved by the community committee. It reminded Daniel that neighborhood cooperation was expected from all homeowners. Then came the sentence that made him pause. If access to the property is refused, the board may take further action. Daniel read the line twice. Further action? They were threatening him over a wedding he never agreed to host. For a moment, he wondered how this situation had even started. His house had always been quiet. He kept to himself, maintained the property carefully, and rarely attended HOA meetings. Apparently, that had allowed someone on the board to make a very bold assumption. Later that evening, Daniel drove to the neighborhood clubhouse where the HOA president, Karen Whitmore, was finishing a meeting. Karen greeted him with the confident smile of someone who believed the decision had already been made. She explained that the couple getting married were longtime residents and deserved a beautiful location. Daniel's property, with its wide lawn and lake view, was the perfect community setting. Daniel listened calmly, then he asked one simple question. "Did anyone from the HOA ever ask for my permission?" Karen hesitated. For the first time, her confident expression faded slightly. But she quickly recovered and said the board had authority to organize community events. Daniel nodded slowly, because at that moment, he realized something. The HOA had made a very serious mistake, and the truth about his property would make this entire wedding plan impossible. Friday morning arrived with unexpected activity. A truck pulled up near Daniel's driveway carrying folding chairs and decoration supplies. Workers stepped out and began unloading equipment. Daniel walked outside just as Karen arrived with a clipboard and a confident smile. "Good morning," she said brightly. "We're getting everything ready for tomorrow." Daniel looked at the growing pile of chairs, decorations, and tables near his lawn, then he calmly folded his arms. Karen explained the full schedule again. Guests would arrive at 4. The ceremony would begin at sunset. Music, food, and photos would follow. To her, everything was already decided. Daniel finally spoke. I think you should stop the setup. Karen frowned. The wedding is approved, she replied. The community board voted on it. Daniel nodded slowly. But the board doesn't own this property, he said calmly. Karen's expression hardened. She insisted the HOA had authority over community spaces. Daniel looked out across the lake behind his house, then he quietly replied, This isn't a community space. Karen crossed her arms, clearly irritated. Well, the guests will arrive tomorrow regardless. Daniel remained calm, because there was one small detail Karen still didn't understand, and when the right person arrived to explain it, the entire wedding plan was about to fall apart. By Saturday morning, the quiet road outside Daniel's house looked very different. Cars began arriving early, decorations were stacked near the driveway. Guests slowly gathered along the roadside, confused but curious about the location. Karen stood near the gate directing workers while checking her clipboard. Everything appeared ready, then a single black SUV pulled up behind the line of vehicles. A county officer stepped out. Karen immediately walked toward him, ready to explain that the event had HOA approval, but the officer didn't speak to her first. Instead, he walked directly to Daniel. They greeted each other calmly, like two people who had already discussed the situation. The officer then turned toward Karen. He asked one simple question. Did the homeowner give permission for this event? Karen hesitated. She quickly explained that the HOA board had approved the wedding location. The officer nodded slowly, then he looked down at the document Daniel handed him. The paper contained property records for the entire lakeside land surrounding the house. The officer studied it for a moment. Then he looked back at Karen, and his next sentence completely changed the atmosphere. Ma'am, this property isn't part of the HOA at all. Karen blinked, because in that moment, the truth about Daniel's land was finally about to come out. The officer held the document up so everyone could see it clearly. According to county records, Daniel's house and the surrounding lakeside property had never been included in the HOA boundaries. Not the lawn, not the garden, not even the private road leading to the house. The land had been privately owned for decades, long before the neighborhood was developed. Daniel's property simply existed beside the community, not inside it. Karen stared at the document in disbelief. For weeks, the HOA board had planned an event on land they didn't control. Guests nearby began whispering quietly. Workers paused their setup. The officer explained calmly that no event could legally happen on private property without the owner's permission. And Daniel had clearly refused. Karen looked around at the chairs, decorations, and arriving guests. The realization slowly spread across her face. The wedding venue they had planned didn't belong to them. Daniel remained calm the entire time. He wasn't angry. He simply wanted his peaceful home left alone. One by one, the workers began packing the chairs back into the truck. Guests slowly returned to their cars. The grand wedding location the HOA promised had disappeared in minutes, and Karen finally understood the mistake that had started everything. But the moment wasn't about winning. For Daniel, it was about protecting the quiet place he had spent years building. Within an hour, the road outside Daniel's house returned to silence. The trucks were gone, the decorations disappeared, even the line of confused guests slowly faded away. Karen stood near the gate for a moment longer, staring at the empty lawn where the ceremony had been planned. Daniel approached calmly. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue, he simply explained something important. His property had been in his family for generations. Long before the HOA community was built nearby, the lakeside land had already belonged to them. The neighborhood was welcome to enjoy the beautiful area around them, but that didn't give anyone the right to take control of someone else's home. Karen nodded quietly. For the first time since this situation began, she looked genuinely embarrassed. Daniel wished the couple getting married a wonderful ceremony somewhere else, but his home would remain exactly what it had always been, a peaceful place beside the lake. As the sun set across the quiet water, Daniel sat on his wooden deck again, watching the evening light reflect across the garden he had protected. And the entire neighborhood would remember the day the HOA tried to schedule a wedding on land that was never theirs, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.